This story happened back in the 90s to my parents during their senior year of high school. Since their group of friends already had cars, the favorite thing they loved to do was night hiking around the state's local mental hospital, mainly to its old dairy farm. This was located on the side of a mountain surrounded by agricultural fields and an open grassland. Since the dairy farm was not close to the mental hospital and the nearest city life was located about 5 miles away, at night the area was extra dark and quiet. Before the dairy farm was closed down, the patients from the mental hospital would go there for work. During this time, some patients lost their lives at this location due to accidents. By the 90s it was abandoned and left like a ghost town of its own, especially due to its rumors of it being haunted. It made the perfect place for fearful experience. So this particular night around 2 in the morning, my dad, my mom, 4 of their female friends, and 1 male friend planned to go to the dairy farm. They took 2 cars, and when they got to the usual parking spot on the side of the mountain, they saw that there was already a group of 20 people standing around their cars. When my parents and their friends got out of their cars, they noticed that the group of men all had shaved heads, were Caucasian, and in their mid-20s. As my parents walked past them, both groups ignored each other and avoided making eye contact. However, my mom turned her head to see one of the men, and as she did this, the man pulled back his jacket and showed a pistol tucked in his pants. Then he pulled back his lower lips, which revealed he had KKK tattooed on his bottom lip. When they were out of hearing range, my mom whispered to my dad, "That man has a gun. And he has KKK tattooed on his lips." My dad brushed it off, thinking my mom was over-exaggerating, and said it was too dark to even notice those 2 things. So with that, my parents and their friends walked through the grassland to get to the dairy farm. The hike to get there is about half a mile from where they parked. However, as soon as they got to the farm, they heard gunshots coming from the direction of the cars. Fearing that something happened to their cars, they booked it back to the parking lot. When they got back, the group of men were already gone. But as they inspected their cars, they saw that all of their tires were slashed and their windows were broken and smashed. My dad, who used a particular colored blanket as a seat cover, and his stereo were stolen. Now they just stood there by their cars wondering what to do next. It's not like they could just call someone for help. Nobody had a cell phone. And since they were deep in the secluded area, they could not flag someone down for a quick pickup. The nearest gas station with a payphone was 5 miles away. Both my dad and his male friend didn't want to leave the cars alone, since they both drove classic cars and they feared that the men would come back. Eventually, it was decided amongst them that sending both males to run to the payphone was the best option, leaving the women by themselves with the cars. This was because they feared that the shaved-head men were waiting down the road expecting them to walk to the payphone. My dad and his friend ran to the gas station. As they left, my mom and her friends all gathered heavy rocks to use as some sort of protective weapon and hid away in the bushes and behind the trees. 2 hours had passed when my mom noticed headlights coming down the road. 2 tow trucks rolled into the parking spot. An immense fear spread throughout the group until they say that out of the tow trucks came my dad, his brothers, and the friend. They hooked up the cars to the tow trucks and were out of there in a matter of minutes. My dad told my mom that as they were running down the dark and empty road, they kept their eyes open just in case the men were hiding with their cars' lights off. Luckily, they got to the gas station without a problem. This next part may be hard to believe, but it's 100% true. 2 weeks had passed and my dad managed to get his car fully repaired and drivable again. My mom and dad were driving to the local store where they parked and got out of the car. As they were walking into the store, a man was walking towards them. As he got closer, my mom realized that this was the same shaved-headed man who flashed the gun at her. My mom immediately told this to my dad, but just like the first time, my dad denied that this was true. Then 2 weeks later at the same store, my mom and dad were sitting in their car while my mom saw a car pull up next to them. As the man got out and just stood there by his car, she quickly noticed that it was the same man from before. My mom immediately told this to my dad. Again, my dad denied it, but my mom looked into his car and saw the very recognizable colorful blanket my dad used as a seat cover. This was when my dad finally connected the dots and got out of the car to confront the man. But the man, realizing what was happening, jumped back into his car and drove away. They didn't have time to get the license plate. The next week, when my dad was filling gas into his car, a car pulled up right behind him, and lo and behold, it was the same man. My dad immediately got into the guy's face ready to confront him, but the man's friends got out of the car and one of them pulled out a gun. The man with the gun then told everyone to get inside the car, and that group drove away. It has been almost 30 years and they have never seen those men ever since. To this day, my parents still wonder if all those encounters were a coincidence or something more sinister. My family and I went on a trip to the Hocking Hills area of southern Ohio a few weeks ago. There was a place that I always wanted to visit, the abandoned ghost town Moonville Rail Tunnel. I have never been to this area, so I didn't know what to expect, but I did know it was pretty deep in the woods. We took a trip from our rented cabin using Google for GPS to the location. We start driving and it's, for lack of better words, real impoverished where we are driving. We literally only see a few cars on the way there and are on back roads. We get to a point where we need to enter into a forest and we are close to the tunnel. There was a sign that said we were entering Bubblewood. For a little additional information, I drive a Mercedes that I am just lucky to have and have my husband in the car, a black man with dreadlocks, my 10-year-old nonverbal autistic son, and my 6-year-old daughter. We drive down this real creepy stone road into the forest and there is nothing back there, no houses, no cars, nobody. We see signs that we are close and pull in the parking lot. There is a footbridge with a ton on it that people put there. We walk over the footbridge and make our way toward the tunnel, which is a lot larger than I expected. We hear this sound coming from the other side of the tunnel that goes into the woods away from the parking lot. A truck comes driving through the tunnel toward us while we are on foot. He gets out of his truck with a chainsaw and it's a white guy in his 60s. He walks with my entire family everywhere we go and through the tunnel. I tried to make small talk with him and pull some info about if he worked for the Department of Natural Resources, etc. He really wasn't budging. We turn around to walk out of the tunnel and he starts using a chainsaw behind us and the sound is just echoing through this tunnel. At this point, we have no cell phone service and literally no one knows my family is out there except us. I was already worried my car was sending the wrong idea to people like we have money or something. We rush to the car to get the kids in their booster seats and this man comes driving over the footbridge in his truck towards us in the parking lot. I honestly don't even know how his truck fit on it. He stops again and gets out of his truck and starts walking the other direction, much to our relief. About this time, I noticed there are dusty handprints on my car. I asked my husband if they were his, and we compared his hand and my son's and they were not a match. I don't know who could have touched the car because we were with the chainsaw man the entire time we were there. We get out of there as fast as possible. Just a few minutes later, I look in my rearview mirror and there is a bunch of dust kicked up behind us and there he is. He had to have driven pretty fast on the stone road to catch up to us like that. There is nowhere to go in this woods. The road is basically one lane and we have no cell service or GPS. Every time I think we lose him, he is there again. I am waiting for my tires to get popped or something or for this guy to ram me off the road into a ravine in the woods. Finally, we get out of this woods and I turn out and he's still following. We were following printed directions to get back and I ended up making a wrong turn in the excitement. The guy in the truck was finally gone and I turned around to go back past the stone road that goes into the forest. There is one lone house near this road, and there is his truck, parked there. He had to have seen us drive onto this road into the woods and taken some back way to the tunnel. I don't know if he was just trying to protect the site from more graffiti or what, but he really creeped us out. It was like every scary movie trope rolled into one single event. When I was around 11 or 12, I had the world on my plate. We had these woods around us that I never ever came close to finding the edge of. I would wake up in the morning early when school was out and my friend Alex and I would spend the whole day out mucking around those woods. We would pack sandwiches and sodas and just go nuts. Play army and war, cowboys and Indians, you name it. This being the 80s and Alex and I being smart enough kids, my parents had no problem with this and enjoyed taking us to the Army surplus store to buy stuff like MREs and survival knives and camping gear. It was pretty regular that we would be allowed to stay out overnight if my dad was there to help us set up camp close to the property. So not on an overnight, but out in about one day we find a treehouse in a part of the woods we have never been to before. Probably about a 2-hour trek from the edge of the neighborhood. Maybe 2 or 3 miles, it was hilly and rocky. Seriously, a kid's dream. This treehouse is probably 30 feet off the ground, but it looks solid. We are so stoked to find out New Castle. We hightail it back home to get some rope and my pops takes us down to the surplus store and over dinner Alex and I can't shut up about it. Next day comes and we hike out at almost dawn. We got a backpack full of rope and sandwiches and our knives on our hips and excitement that's so thick we could chew on it. We make it out there and start attaching rungs made from big sticks onto one end of the rope. It took us a good few hours, but we get one side finished and the rope tossed over the branch that's where the little deck and door are. We finally climb up and are sitting on the deck looking out and rock, paper, scissors for who gets to go in first. Alex wins and goes in and comes right out. He's white as a sheet and wants to go home. So curious as I am, I go inside. This treehouse is probably 8 by 8 and about 8 meters high inside. The inside walls are covered, every single inch, of naked girls. Not awesome found Playboy porn, but kiddie porn. I think the oldest kids were about my age, but it was Polaroids and glossy magazine pages, stuck perfectly up with staples and filling the walls up. We informed my pops about it and he calls the cops. The officer shows up and asks us a few questions like where it is, how did we get up there, where did we buy the rope, did we take any pictures off the wall? He got increasingly rude about it and my pops put an end to it. He left with our statement and said he would be in touch. We were no longer allowed to take overnights in the woods or be out there for more than an hour without checking in. We actually built a really long tin can phone with the permission of my parents, which allowed us a bit more of our freedom, but we were pretty cut off from the deep exploring. About a year or two later, that same cop stopped me when I was hanging out in a different park. Saw me smoking and caught me with a joint. Alex asked him whatever happened with the treehouse. The cop told us to not do drugs and left us alone. In college, many moons later, Alex sent me an email saying how he read in the big state paper that officer shot himself with his service revolver after his wife found out he was circulating CP. So it comes to my mind like it came to Alex's that we had found his little CP stash/cave. The creepy part came a few months later when Alex sent me another email saying that he went to the estate auction and one of the items for sale was a rope ladder with a bag.